Paul, it's a pleasure to be able to celebrate and recognize your career-long dedication and commitment to the case method. Your contribution has simply been outstanding. And it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to have a conversation with you about the lessons that you've learned in your experience and some tips perhaps that you can pass on to newcomers to the case method. So congratulations again. And perhaps I could kick off by asking you, over such a career and such a long commitment and contribution to the case method, what was it about the case method that so inspired you to commit to it over such a long period?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for your gracious introduction and the opportunity to chat for a little while. I first became introduced to the case method as a third-year undergraduate business student. And I remember at the end of the first week of classes, just being astounded at the difference between lecturing and the use of cases as the primary methodology. It was the engagement that I'd never seen in classes before, and that many people in the world have actually still not seen, because they're still not using cases. And I found that the engagement was exciting, that I felt like I was an integral part of the class as opposed to one of dozens of people, watching and taking notes, and I think that was the greatest part of it that engaged me with the case method. And, it was such that by the end of, fourth year, when I finished my undergraduate degree, that's when I had started thinking about an academic career, because I thought, wow, this seems like a really interesting job that these professors have. I didn't know anything about research at the time, but on the teaching side, it just seemed like something that worked and that was interesting and fun.
That's terrific. Especially nice to hear you talk about learning about research as well, because sometimes there's I think a false conflict is set up between research and writing cases, and actually you've combined the two. Has that worked well for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for many cases, there's absolutely an element of research that goes into it. You want to have a credible story. You want to have not just the case, but the teaching note, which is so important, and especially nowadays with the growth in MSc programs. I mean, as you well know, it's the fastest growing degree program in business schools. And, certainly in MSc programs, in the teaching notes, they want to see the linkages between research and teaching, that this is an example of this particular theory or model, or a limitation, or a way to extend a theory or model. And so, to me, these are quite complementary activities and quite effective. And I think that a lot of research goes into a good case. It's not your classic, or what used to be called Little Willie story. There's a whole lot more to it than that. And the trick is then to, of course, synthesize everything to a length that makes sense. And this is not unlike the process in writing journal articles. You don't get 50 pages to say it, and how many times have people had an article accepted, and then the editor-in-chief says, okay, we're accepting your article. That's the good news. The bad news maybe is that we only want it as a research note. And can you please cut this thing down? So, we'll end up getting it to a length, and that to me is the hard work with the cases. And, one of the things that I've always tried to personally concentrate on and encouraged others to do, a case is not supposed to be a book. It's supposed to be at a length that the students will actually read it and have time to think about it, as opposed to pretend to read it and pretend to have thought about it, because these 25 or 30 page epistles, I don't know anybody who reads these things anymore. And in certain countries, they're, as you well know, I mean, these kinds of cases are literally unsellable. nobody wants to buy them because the students just flat out won't read them in a lot of countries. So, there's a reality here that we have to keep in mind. And of course, there is a strong link to me between research and case writing anyways.
It's an interesting insight into how you think through the process of case writing. Is there a piece of advice, a single fundamental principle that you would like to pass on to newcomers to case writing?
It is something that in many ways is a thing that they should engage in themselves, I think, while they're doing research. And so, this may sound a bit odd, but the process of journal article writing is so fraught with problems and deadlines that you miss, and it takes years to do it. You can actually do some case writing in a shorter time period and have it published and be learning at the same time. And I have found, for example, that case writing has created lots of research ideas for me, because you start, you're talking to managers, you're engaging with them, and you realize that the problem they're dealing with, the scholarly community has not really dealt with at all, or not very well. And maybe this would be a good area for which to do some research. So, I do find these to be quite complementary activities. It's nice to be able to finish something while you're still working on an article. So my habit has been, I try to work on 4 cases a year, and I've done that for 35 years now. It's just part of, my annual activities. And, it sometimes varies a little, but that seems to have worked as a sort of basic formula. But at least 1 case a year, I don't think there's anything that is stopping anybody from doing a case a year. I mean, it's pretty easy with your own contacts or the contacts of your institution or alumni networks to get started. And there's lots of support material that you have and Ivey has and others have about how to write cases. So I don't think there's any big impediment. And of course, we all know that there's more incentives now to write cases. I mean, the accreditation agencies are looking at case writing as a legitimate activity. Some of the countries in which I'm regularly interacting, they actually pay a cash bonus to their faculty members if they get a case accepted for distribution in a major, from one of the major distributors. And some of them are even treating it as a sort of tier 2 publication, because certainly the cases that we register are reviewed. We reject cases. Everything that comes over the transom doesn't get published, and we have to, I think, have these quality control things that are similar to the review process. So to me, it's just a natural part of one's academic activities that I would certainly encourage new faculty members to consider as part of their portfolio.
It's very good to hear you talk of the way in which case writing is being recognized as a scholarly and an impactful activity. Case writing in some quarters can be seen as an under-recognized activity in terms of career development. And it's good to hear you speak about the recognition of the AACSB 2020 standards, for example, and incentivization by some more enlightened schools in the form of cash support. Is that a step that you welcome?
Definitely. I'm not suggesting that writing a case is, equivalent to an FT 50 publication. I'm not suggesting that in the slightest. Okay, the tier 1 journal article is an awful lot of work, and the typical case is work, but it's not that much work. But I do think that it should be recognized, because the reality is that most business schools, if we think about our workloads, it's intended to be 40% research, 40% teaching, and 20% service. And teaching, to me, should not be strictly limited to in-class number of classes. You know, there's the development of teaching material. You know, to me, you know, if you're a case writer, you're not just a retailer of somebody else's material all the time. You're actually one of the content creators, and I think that's a nice piece to have in a portfolio.
Mm. Now, you started this conversation by saying that what really gripped you about the case method was seeing it come alive in the classroom and realizing that you were part of the action rather than a spectator.
Yeah.
So I wanted to move on to ask about your thoughts on case teaching, because that really is where the case comes alive. Do you have any advice for someone who's coming new to case teaching?
Yeah, I mean, I actually, there, you know, there's a few things, and this comes up a lot with people who have not taught with cases before, and they're trying to understand, you know, should I take the plunge? So, I mean, I borrow from the old Nike commercial, you know, just do it. You don't need to overthink this, you know, and all of us who have taught with and written cases, you know, ask anybody, can you tell me the name of some of the most teachable cases you've got? And there used to be an expression that some folks at our place had years ago about certain cases that were so easy to teach. They were so much fun that is, you know, their expression was, you could teach this case with a bag over your head, okay? And I'm not exactly sure what all the metaphor what there was, but the idea is it was so easy and so much fun. You can't screw this up. And so, you know, that's a great place to start, you know, and, you know, I encourage people that are thinking about case writing for the first time to register with, you know, Ivey Publishing, the Case Center, review cases and the teaching notes in particular to see which ones you feel comfortable with. And that can be a great way to zoom in on examples of ones that, yeah, I think I can make this work. You know, I understand this industry, I got some experience there, or, you know, whatever it is, you know, it's one of my neighbors. I've been talking to this guy forever about his business. And so I think I know pretty much any kind of question that might pop up. You know, I think that's one source. And then, you know, looking at things like bestseller lists, I mean, they can't all be wrong. You know, if you've got, you know, to make bestseller lists at, you know, any of our groups, I mean, you got to sell a lot of copies. And so that's a way to, you know, find an example, or just ask, you know, somebody who's an experienced case teacher, are there a couple of cases that you would recommend to start with? You know, and then it's just confidence building. And you know, I find that a lot of people, that the challenge is just to get over the hump of case teaching. And you know, I've been, you know, Richard, some of the countries that I've taught in where they've never taught cases before, I've been astounded at the faculty reactions. I mean, the problem's not the students, the problem is the professors. So I remember teaching a case in Kenya at a business school, and nobody had taught cases there before. And so they didn't know what to think. And the faculty were thinking, well, I don't think this is going to work. And I said, well, can you get a group of students and give them an hour before class just to read the case? And here's some assignment questions. So I said, yeah, I guess so. We'll try it. And so all the profs sat in the back, and all these students who had been volunteered to do this were in a normal case setting. Well, the case went well. And all these guys in the back are shaking their heads. How is this possible? Where has this thing been all these years? And you know, similarly, I had an experience many years ago when China was first embracing the case method. The dean of a very major business school, you know, I was using cases on an executive program, and he said, you know, that's really interesting, but it would never work in China. And I said, why is that? So, well, Chinese students don't talk. I said, with respect, what do you mean they don't talk? When they're outside of class, do they talk? Of course they talk. Okay, well, why don't they talk in class? Oh, I get your point, because we don't ask them to talk. We don't engage them. And so, nowadays, of course, there are many case schools in China. There's big and growing use of the case method there, because if you give students the chance to engage, they will.
Well, your joy and enthusiasm and commitment in this conversation is catching. It's evident to see why you've been engaged with the case method for so long. But for your many engagements and achievements with the case method, which one really sticks out in your memory?
I mean, I've obviously written cases for a long time, and there's been lots of adoptions, and one of the things that I do sometimes with researchers that drive some of them a bit crazy is I'll throw out a comparison. I'll say, well, my cases have been studied, I don't know, between 3.5 and 4 million times that I have hard evidence on, and my research has been cited, on Google Scholar, 38,000 times or something in that ballpark. I said, but for every prof I'm touching, I'm touching 100 students, which is better, and that gives people a bit of pause. But despite the fact of writing cases that are meeting the market test, and my work with Ivey Publishing to put a business model in place that has been successful. I think that the biggest impact, though, has been in relation to the 39 country initiative, which is something I started now 11 years ago, that makes the Ivey cases available for free in universities in the world's 39 poorest countries. And I think that that's the one that will have ultimately the greatest long-term impact, simply because the need is so great in the poorest countries for current high-quality content that is not going to cost them. I mean, the cost to them is basically the cost of the printing, I mean, if I know you've been to some of these really poor countries that just don't have the resources that you and I take for granted. But in many places, the students can't afford their own copies. So the library has photocopies for them to read, but at least it's current content. And with the growing number of cases in some of the poorest countries, so of the 39 countries, 34 are in Africa. So we've got a growing body of Africa-related content, because everybody wants some content that they can most relate to. But I think that has the potential to have the greatest impact, and I just wish I could do more on it. We're currently working on more translations of cases into French, because in Francophone Africa, there's a real dearth of translations of cases. Working on putting together workshop formats that don't require me or you or a prof to show up and physically run it. So a lot more online materials, and because I think that that's the way that we'll get the usage up in these places. And I like to think that my original objective on this is one of poverty reduction. If we can create better qualified managers, better managers, who've got better critical thinking skills, and are accustomed to thinking in an actionable way, we can reduce poverty to some extent through the content that we have. So that to me is the one that I suspect will have the longest term impact, at least, and I hope it will. I'm still working away at it.
Well, congratulations, and I wish you every success with that initiative. There can be no better way to end our conversation.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Paul. It's been a real privilege and enjoyment. Thank you.
and this is the very heavy award that you sent to me. So I wanted to make sure that you know that I received it and I appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Not at all. On behalf of myself and the Case Centre and case practitioners all over the world, we're very grateful for what you've done. And it's good to know that your influence and impact will continue in future as well. So congratulations again, and thank you.
Thank you, Richard.